My name is Floyd. I am 67 years old, a weary heart, and more memories than visits. Lying on a bed at the Sharp Memorial in San Diego, 2 days after a heart attack, I asked myself a question that still echoes in me. How do you raise someone for a lifetime and lose that person in a late-night call? Maybe you've felt it too, that strange feeling that something doesn't fit, that you gave everything you had, time, money, silence, love, and yet you were left over. The monitor beeped next to me. The strong smell of the hospital took over the room, and I realized that the pain in my chest did not come only from the heart. It came from the void of absence, from the distance that grows without asking permission. I looked at an old photo of my daughter Mary on graduation day and remembered the promise I made to her mother before I lost her, to take care of our little girl at all costs. I thought I had fulfilled. I really did. In this video, I'm going to tell you how a single call changed everything, what I heard that night, what I found out later, and how silence sometimes teaches more than any screaming. Because some goodbyes are not said out loud. They arrive by phone, and they stay forever. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. No one is prepared to hear what I heard that night. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the phone rang, and my daughter's voice, Mary, crossed the line like an icy knife. "Dad, I'm getting married tomorrow. The apartment and the car are sold. Bye." Is that it? Without emotion, without justification, no room for answer. And it was there, in that dry and calculated minute, that 30 years of love turned into silence. I could only say one sentence. "You forgot one thing." She didn't understand what it was, but I was going to understand. And when he understood, it would be too late. If you are here with me now, hearing these words, it is because you may have already felt this pain that cannot be explained. So I ask you, with an open heart, if these words have already touched something that lives inside, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but so that other people like us don't go through this alone. Because what I'm going to tell from now on is not just a story. It is an open wound that still pulsates, and maybe, if we tell it together, it hurts a little less. The dawn was too quiet. The hospital slept, but my mind didn't. It was the second day there, and it still felt like my body hadn't fully returned. That cold room, the hum of the heart monitor, the serum hanging like an hourglass, counting how much time I would have left. The light in the corridor came in dimly through the crack in the door. I stared at the white ceiling, trying to remember how I got there. The last thing I remembered before the heart attack was the smell of burning coffee in the kitchen and the noise of the newspaper falling on the balcony. It had been an ordinary morning, until my heart decided to scream everything I had been silent about for years. The phone next to the bed rang, cutting through the silence like a thin blade. It was not common for them to call their room directly at dawn. For a moment I thought it was nursing, some shift change, or, who knows, an emergency. Maybe, deep in my chest, I hoped it was her, Mary, even for no reason, even without expectation. "Dad, it's me." The voice came in firmly, emotionless. It wasn't the timbre I remembered of the little girl who ran with a colorful backpack down the corridor of our old house. It was something almost business. Cold. "Daughter, are you okay? It's late. It scared me. I'm getting married tomorrow." In Las Vegas, Leo and I decided not to wait any longer. I thought I had misunderstood. "What's it like?" I asked, trying to sit up on the bed, but the monitor beeped faster and the IV pulled my arm back. "Everything is ready. I used the money from the apartment and the car. It will work out well for the ceremony and the honeymoon." I kept quiet. One part of me was trying to process the words. Another could only feel the cold rising from the base of my spine to the back of my neck. "The apartment is equipped with the car." My head was spinning. The apartment I spent months looking for security, for location, for future, that I put in the family trust in her name so that she would have stability when I was no longer here. And the car, a graduation gift. I had said, "You are supposed to walk freely, my daughter. Don't depend on anyone." And now all of that had become a bargaining chip for a whirlwind wedding in Las Vegas, with a man I barely knew, Leo Morrison. A beautiful name, yes. A lined smile, yes, but empty and dangerous, I felt. "Mary, we need to talk about it." "There's nothing to talk about. I'm 28 years old, Dad. I can make my decisions." "Leo says you hold me too much, that I have always been dependent. This is my chance to grow." Her words hit me like those collection letters that arrive even after you've paid everything. I was silent for a few seconds. She didn't seem to feel guilty. He didn't seem to hesitate. It was as if I was reading a script. "Leo says," Leo thinks. There, in the hospital, with my chest still sensitive from the heart attack, I realized that what killed me was not the sick heart. It was the realization that she was no longer my daughter. It was the voice of another man speaking for her. "I'm sorry for your heart, but I can no longer live with this guilt of having to please you all the time. I need to think about myself." Then she said, "Bye, Dad." And that's when something in me ignited, something that didn't scream but burned inside. I took a deep breath and just said, "You forgot something." She was silent for a few seconds. "What?" I didn't answer. I only smiled slightly, even with my face wet with cold sweat. "You'll find out." And I hung up. My eyes were fixed on the ceiling for a time that I can't measure. I didn't cry. I didn't hit the bed. I didn't call a nurse. I just stayed there. Whole on the outside, but in pieces on the inside. You know, there are betrayals that hurt more than any heart attack. When the heart fails, doctors take care. But when the soul breaks, only God knows what he can fix. Natural pause. Moment of reflection. It is at these times that we realize what hurts the most is not losing things. It is to realize that those we have protected the most have turned against us without warning. And I wanted to ask you, who are listening to me, have you ever felt something like this? Have you ever had a love turn your back while you were still reaching out? If you've experienced this, comment below. He only says, "I've lived it," or "It touched me." Sometimes just seeing that there are more people feeling what we feel, the breast relieves a little. And there, in that white room without windows, with the smell of antiseptic and a ruined soul, I understood that the worst pain of a father is not to be betrayed. It's realizing that you didn't even have to yell at him. All it took was a bye. But what Mary didn't know, it's just that the apartment she thought she sold so easily, it wasn't exactly what she thought. And that's when my silence became a strategy. Because when everything falls apart, there is only one choice left. Either you give up, or he begins to dig through the ruins until he finds what is left of him. And I started digging. The first time I saw Leo Morrison was on a Sunday night in La Jolla at that Italian restaurant that Mary always loved, Bella Notte. It was where we used to celebrate everything, good grade, birthday, even small victories. She chose the place on purpose, I think, as if to say, "Look, Dad, I'm including you." But from the moment that man walked through the door, something in the air changed. He wore a tailored dark suit, shoes that glowed as if they had never stepped on the ground. He had a quick, trained smile, and a Rolex on his wrist that seemed more interested in showing status than telling the time. He presented himself too firmly. "Leo Morrison, nice to meet you. Your daughter tells me a lot about you, Mr. Rivera." I smiled politely, held out my hand, but my instinct, this old courtroom companion, was already blowing alert in my ear. His handshake was firm, but he had that hesitation of someone who measures you more than greets you. Leo didn't sit down. He took a stand, next to Mary in a rehearsed gesture, as if she had done that before, maybe with other families. We talked over a lasagna that I couldn't finish. He said he worked with strategic consulting, but when I asked him what exactly he did, he replied with beautiful but empty words. "We help people maximize their financial opportunities." I asked, "What do you mean with investments, real estate, market, startups?" He deflected. "A little bit of everything. It's a broad field." He didn't explain anything. Mary smiled proudly, struck up a conversation, as if she wanted to convince me of the obvious. "Isn't that a wonderful man, Dad?" I looked at him and saw a mirror of everything I had learned to identify in the corridors of justice. Those people who talk a lot and don't say anything. People who know what to wear, what to praise, but who never really show their hands. At the time of the wine, Leo made a point of asking for the most expensive bottle. And when the bill arrived, he rehearsed a brief, almost theatrical protest, then backed down. I paid, and the relief on his face lasted a second before he smiled again. It was at that moment that I felt this man was doing calculations. And it wasn't about wine. It was about us. In the parking lot, I watched his car. An imposing BMW, but rented, I noticed, by the leasing company's sign on the window. I saw how she opened the door for Mary with rehearsed elegance. How he looked around before entering. He was a trained man. But trained for what? Mary hugged me goodbye. Strong. That way of a daughter trying to prove that everything is fine. "Dad, I'm happy." I shook my head. "That's what matters, daughter." But inside my head was already full of question marks. I drove back home slowly. The city looked the same, but I knew something had changed. A new emptiness was settling in. That kind of silence that doesn't come from the noise that is missing, but from the intuition that screams. I lay that night with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, just as I did after the phone call. But that night, something in me was already starting to prepare. I just didn't know what it was yet, but I knew that Leo Morrison was not what he seemed, and that sooner or later the truth was going to be shown. The question was, when? And even more, how much would Mary have to lose to see on her own? There are things that we keep without knowing that it will hurt later, and I kept everything. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every silence I had to swallow after Sarah was gone. Mary was only 13 years old when I lost my wife, and in a way I lost part of myself with it. But what was left, I gave it to her. Every gesture of mine, from then on, was to hold that girl upright. I paused my career in the law firm. 2 whole years away from the meeting rooms, the courts, the trips. I exchanged the suit for the T-shirt, the car for the school bus. I hired nannies, psychologists, private teachers. I made lunch with a recipe on the internet and slept sitting on the couch waiting for her to come back from class. When she cried at dawn, missing her mother, I locked myself in the bathroom afterwards to cry too. But I never let her see it. Because a child needs a firm harbor, not a shipwreck. When she passed Berkeley, I cried like a child, pride and fear. I knew it was going to be expensive, but I opened my retirement fund and paid every penny without blinking. I made sure that she went with dignity. I didn't just send money. I sent letters. I sent frozen food in the mail. I sent my presents the way I could, and she answered me with gratitude. I still hear her voice saying, "Dad, one day I'm going to give you all this back." But I didn't want it back. I just wanted to see her well. Christmases from then on were ours alone. We set up a small tree in the living room. We exchanged modest gifts, but full of affection. I always bought books. She gave me funny socks. We laughed. We made pancakes the day before, and I thought everything was right. When she graduated, I was the only one in the audience with a hand-painted poster. "Go, Mary!" I did it, with gouache paint and pure pride. After graduation, she wanted to live in San Diego, near me. I suggested North Park. Quiet neighborhood, well located. I spent months looking for the right apartment. When I found it, I made a point of putting it in the family trust, with a protection clause. Mary would be the beneficiary, but I would stay as curator, making sure no one took it away from her. I did this thinking about her future, in safety, in the home she would have when I was no longer here. The day I handed over the keys, she cried. He hugged me tightly. "You're everything to me, Dad." And I believed it. I also gave him a car, simple but new, graduation gift. I remember my line, "It's for you to walk alone without depending on anyone. But if one day you need to, I'm here." And now all of that, apartment, car, promises, have become currency for a man she barely knew. A hasty wedding in another city, a short, dry call like someone unpacking a suitcase. "I'm getting married. I sold everything. Bye." Just like that. Bye. I stared at the ceiling of the hospital with the feeling that a piece of my life had been ripped out and thrown away. Not for the money, not for the property, but because every single thing she sold had my effort inside. Every wall of that apartment had paint from my soul. The steering wheel of that car knew my hands, and she threw it all into the lap of a man who said I was an obstacle. And perhaps at that moment she believed it. Maybe Leo said I would arrest her, that I prevented her from growing. And maybe she really wanted to get out of my shadow, but did she know the price she was going to pay? Did she imagine how much that goodbye would echo in me as a sentence? In that hospital, between machines and memories, I began to ask myself, is protecting too much the same as imprisoning? Can loving so much be blind? And it was in this bitter doubt that I made my decision. If she had forgotten everything I did, I was going to remember her. But not angry, not even with screams, with facts, with truths, with silence, and with something she never expected, justice. But the first step would be to find out who, in fact, Leo Morrison was, because if he was really the one I feared... So Mary hadn't just sold an apartment, she had sold her own soul, and maybe there was still time to stop him from taking the rest. Coming home from the hospital was strange. Everything was in place, but nothing looked the same. The armchair where I read my favorite books, the cracked cup that Sarah loved, the rug with the marks of Mary's feet when she was little, everything there, but with a different silence. A heavy silence. One of those that we feel in our bones. The phone she used to call me was still in the same place. I looked at him for long minutes before picking it up. I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't know how much it was going to hurt. Marcus Porter was my trusted partner from the days when I worked on major corporate fraud cases. Discreet, effective, loyal. We had already unmasked many people together. And though time had passed, I knew he still answered when he was serious. I called. He answered the second ring. "Floyd, I was waiting for this call since the day you left the office." I told him what was happening. I didn't omit anything. I talked about the wedding in Las Vegas, the sale of the apartment, that Leo Morrison. And I ended with a phrase that hurt me to say, "Marcus, my daughter is about to fall into a hole of no return. And if I don't do anything, she won't come back." He listened to me in silence, as he always did. In the end, he said, "Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, a brown briefcase arrived at my door. Firm paper, typed letters, everything organized as Marcus always did. I sat at the table with a strong coffee next to me. My heart still complained sometimes, but nothing stopped me from opening it. The first pages were about Leo's professional life. Or rather, the absence of it. No registered customers, no company in your name. The so-called strategy consultant was a beautiful facade for nothing. Then came the financial data. Leo lived in a luxury condominium in Hillcrest, but the rent had been overdue for 3 months. The car, that BMW that he displayed as a trophy, was rented, with 2 installments due. All image, nothing root. I continued reading. That's when the floor started to disappear. 2 women mentioned, ex-relationships, both with older, successful, independent women. In both cases, he got involved quickly, took on the role of emotional savior, and in less than a year, disappeared. Before, of course, convincing the 2 to sell goods and invest in opportunities that never existed. Amanda Becker, 42, head nurse at a hospital in Sacramento. He lost $90,000. Jennifer Cole, 46, a university professor. He lost a car and a life insurance. Both opened police reports, but without concrete evidence, the processes did not move forward. He always wore the same pattern: emotional seduction, promises of the future, and then escape. I closed the folder. I took a deep breath. I was no longer dealing with an inconvenient son-in-law. I was dealing with an emotional predator, a professional of handling, a man who lives by emptying lives and then disappearing. The worst thing was not knowing that. The worst thing was knowing that Mary was next, and time was against me. I'm here opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. It may be that my story helps someone. It may be that someone out there is experiencing something similar. And look, no one deserves to go through this alone. I knew I had to act, but with precision. I couldn't just run and scream. That would only drive Mary further away. She needed to see for herself. But what if, by the time she could see, it was too late? That's when I decided the next step would not be mine. It would be hers, and it would all begin with a mistake that Leo did not expect to make. That morning, I opened the iron drawer of the office cabinet with trembling hands. The old smell of paper and dust hit me like a breath of frozen time. Everything inside had a story, a reason to exist. Folders with faded labels, old contracts, Sarah's records, letters from Mary when she still wrote father with the wrong accent. But what I was looking for was more specific, and when I pulled out the blue briefcase with the inscription Dale Family Trust, I felt a shiver creep up my back. There was the document. The original deed to the apartment in North Park, written by me, registered in a notary's office, signed calmly and lovingly, at a time when I believed that protecting Mary meant leaving everything in her name. But I wasn't naive. He knew how the world could change. Therefore, I used a specific legal structure, the trust. I reread the main clause in a low voice, as one reading a psalm. Mary Dale Rivera, beneficiary of the estate described, will be able to enjoy the property, but does not have authorization to sell or transfer it without the signature of the legal curator, Floyd Dale Rivera. She never read that, or if you read it, you never understood. Leo, for sure, did not read it, and there was his mistake, a small but fatal mistake. By convincing Mary to sell the apartment and use the money to pay for the wedding in Las Vegas, he put her in an illegal position. That was technically real estate fraud. The sale could only happen with my subscription. Without it, any movement was null. And worse, it opened space for criminal investigation. Leo dug his own hole. I spent the rest of the afternoon sorting everything out. Contracts, statements, certified copies, value transfer emails, bank statements showing the deposit of the sale, everything. I organized by date, put colored labels as I did in my days as a lawyer. Green for legal documents, red for bank transactions, yellow for circumstantial evidence. Each roll was a reminder of who I was, who she was, and who he pretended to be. But what hurt the most was seeing my handwriting on that first page, written years earlier. This document aims to ensure my daughter's property security in case she ever needs to be protected, including from herself. That sentence now gained a weight that I never wanted it to gain. I wrote that in a moment of prudence, of a dutiful father. But today, it has become a wall. Mary didn't know she was in possession of something she couldn't sell. She thought she was in control. But it was just another plaything in the hand of a man who knew how to use words as if they were promises. And now, with everything in hand, I was ready not to attack, but to show with facts, show it calmly, show with love, because there are things that we don't save with shouting, only with light. But would Mary see it before Leo took the next step, or had it already been given? I made an appointment with Mary at a low-key cafe in Bankers Hill, a place we used to go when she still lived here. It had a wall full of books and a scent of toasted bread that she always said reminded her of her childhood. I arrived early, as I always did. I liked to observe the place before, feel the environment. I chose a table in the corner, facing the door, and ordered a black tea. My heart was still too sensitive for coffee. She entered 10 minutes later. She wore a beige silk blouse, impeccable makeup, sunglasses, and a bag that I knew didn't match the bank account she had 2 months ago. The ring shone. He was different too, firmer, harder. It was as if she was playing a role. "I missed here," she said, sitting without hugging me. "I felt it too," I replied. I didn't beat around the bush. I took the brown briefcase from the bag next to me, placed it on the table, and opened it slowly, as if delivering a letter I wouldn't want to write. "This here, it is the trust, the original document of the apartment. It's all here, Mary. Signed, registered, validated, and with a clear clause. You can't sell without my signature." She frowned, picked up the papers as if picking up a gift with thorns. She read quickly, but I could see on her face that each line was a cut. That doesn't make sense. I sold it, I received the amount." "Yes, he did, but those who bought it bought wind, because the property was never yours. And now the registry office will annul everything. The money will have to come back, and if it doesn't come back, it can become a case of justice." She looked at me as if I had betrayed her, as if I had set it up. "So that's it? Did you set a trap? Did you give me a gift with hidden weaponry?" "No, Mary. I gave you a shelter, and I put a lock inside. Only I could open it, to protect you, of others, and yourself. If one day I lost my way—" Her voice began to fail, but it wasn't crying. It was anger. "Leo told me that this was going to happen, that you were going to try to arrest me, that you were going to use law document past. He said you don't see me as an adult, that you see me as property. Leo," I spoke slowly, "Leo prepared you well then. He prepared to doubt me. But it didn't prepare you for the truth." She got up from her chair, her eyes watering but her posture firm. "You just can't stand to see me happy without you, Dad. That's all." I swallowed hard. I was silent for a few seconds before answering. "Mary, I don't want to see you without me. I want to see you whole. And this man, he just wants the pieces that fit him." She left without looking back, the designer bag swinging on the shoulder, the drag of the heels echoing on the floor of the cafe. I sat there with the tea already cold. The place seemed darker, the wall of books more dusty. The waiter passed by, looked at me with pity, but it wasn't too bad. I wanted it. It was time for her to see. And in that silence between pain and calm, I thought to myself, if you got this far listening to my story, stay with me. Because what comes next I never told anyone, not even out loud. And what Mary saw that week, it was the beginning of the end of the fairy tale that Leo sold to her. But would she hold out when the castle began to collapse? Marcus called me on a Tuesday morning. I was still drinking coffee, spreading butter on a loaf of bread that seemed too big for my hunger, when he said, "Floyd, the second dossier has arrived. You need to see that." I met him in the parking lot of a market in Del Cerro, a discreet place with no cameras around like in the old days. He handed me a thick envelope, and in his eyes there was already a warning. What was inside was going to mess with me. And it did. 2 women. Amanda Becker, 2018, Jennifer Walsh, 2020. Same story, 2 different names. Amanda was head nurse at a hospital in Sacramento. Leo appeared in her life with the same uniform as always. Well-cut suit, promises of the future, common plans. In less than 6 months, she placed him as the second beneficiary of the life insurance. In 8, he sold the house to invest in such a consulting expansion project. He never saw the money back. Within 14 months, Leo began to drift away. At 18, he disappeared. He blocked her number. She filed a civil lawsuit, but had no evidence of coercion. Nothing moved. Jennifer Walsh, university professor of literature, different speech but the same script. A recent widow, soft-hearted, thirsty for a new beginning. Leo was kind, affectionate, helpful. He won her son first, then her. In less than a year, the joint account was created. Additional card, travel plan, everything meticulously prepared. He convinced her to sell a piece of land owned by the family. He promised to open an educational foundation. When she asked to see the documents, he was already leaving. She still got a restraining order, but Leo was never located to sign. What left me speechless was the pattern, the words he used. "You're special. I've never loved someone like that. The life I imagined begins now." And more, "Your father doesn't understand. Your past holds you back. You need to cut that cord." The same phrases Mary had used with me. I needed to talk to one of them. I chose Jennifer. I sent a discreet email. I introduced myself, explained my situation to Mary, and asked only, "Find me. I just want to understand." 3 days later, she agreed. Starbucks, Mission Valley. Jennifer arrived with an old binder and eyes of someone who didn't want to remember but couldn't forget either. She sat facing me, asked for a chamomile tea, and started counting. She opened the binder. Bank statements, screenshots of conversations, handwritten letters by Leo, everything there. It was as if I was reading the same story as my daughter, only with a more bitter ending. The last letter he left before he disappeared read, "You are amazing, but I'm made to fly." Gee. It was there that my hand began to tremble. I recorded the conversation with her consent, not to use against Leo, but to use in favor of Mary, to show that it wasn't love. It was standard. It was method. Jennifer looked me in the eye at the end and said, "Mr. Rivera, he doesn't just want money, he wants dominance. He feeds on the fall." At that moment I realized that it was no longer about the apartment, nor about the car. It was about my daughter's soul. About what she would lose from herself if she stayed longer in that world that Leo builds. And look, if you're listening to this and you've ever seen someone you love falling into a hole that only you can see, tell me, can you sleep in peace? Can you just wait? Sometimes the worst pain is to see who we have created with so much love, being used by those who only know how to destroy. If this makes sense to you, comment below, "I understand you." Well, because only those who have lived through it know how much this silence weighs. I left the cafe with one certainty: I was going to bring my daughter back. Not even that she hated me for a while. But what I didn't know yet was that Leo had already planted the next step. And Mary, I was about to cross the line of the point of no return. I have never been a man to invade ceremony, not even when I was young. I have always believed that everyone has the right to make mistakes in peace. But this was not just any ceremony. It was a sentence disguised as a veil and organ music. When Marcus sent me the information that the wedding would be the following Saturday at the Forever Yours Chapel in Las Vegas, I didn't hesitate. I called Jennifer and asked if she had the courage to look him in the eye again. She took a deep breath on the other end of the line and said, "If it's to save another woman from what I experienced, I'm going." I packed my briefcase. Each document millimetrically positioned. Leo's previous marriage certificates, civil lawsuits filed, prints of copied promises, the same phrases made to other women, proof of bank transfers, the joint account statement with Jennifer, even copies of the restraining orders. Nothing was guesswork. It was all concrete, dated, stamped, pure truth, dressed in paper. We arrived in Vegas the night before. I slept badly, as expected. Jennifer met me at the hotel cafeteria at 7 in the morning. He had deep dark circles under his eyes and a determined look. We agreed on everything, wait for the right moment. I wasn't going to make a scene, just show what needed to be seen. The chapel was small, adorned with artificial white flowers and LED lights trying to imitate candles. Outside, a black limousine with engine running. Leo did not skimp on the spectacle. Mary entered in a simple but beautiful dress. She was beautiful. A fragile beauty, almost as if it were made of glass. I almost got up right there just to get her out of there. But I waited. The pastor began. Firm voice, fast reading, like every hurried wedding in Vegas. When he asked if there was anyone who opposed the union, I got up slowly. "I have something this bride needs to see before she signs anything." Everyone turned around. Some murmured. Leo froze. Mary looked at me as if I had pulled the floor under her feet. I approached the altar calmly. I extended the folder. I'm not going to scream. I didn't come to make a scandal, but I came to fulfill what I promised your mother, protect you. I handed her the bundle of documents. Read, Mary. Is that it? Read it. She hesitated. Leo tried to get closer, but Jennifer appeared behind me, firm, and said, Mary, I was the previous one. Silence turned to concrete in the air. Mary began to flip through the papers, first slowly, then faster. The eyes sweeping the dates, the signatures, the highlighted excerpts. When it came to the letters, the copied promises, I saw the color disappear from her face. Leo tried to intervene. This is a setup. This is persecution of X. He's manipulating you. Jennifer took out of her bag a photo of her and Leo together, in the same ring he now wore with Mary. Do you want me to show you more, Leo? He took a step back. Mary stood still for long seconds. Then he took off his ring with trembling fingers. He looked at me, the teary eyes, the low voice. You tried to warn me. I never stopped, daughter. Leo tried to leave on his own, but two guests, one of them was the brother of Mary's best friend, a lawyer, had already called the police. The documents in his hands were strong enough to, at the very least, launch an investigation. Leo left the chapel escorted, trying to hide his face. The limousine stood there, empty, as a symbol of what he was. Facade. Mary stood at the altar. The pastor had already left. The guests looked at each other without knowing if they were staying or leaving. I approached. I touched her shoulder. Come, let's get out of here. She didn't say anything, but he did not resist. She let me guide her to the bench. We got into the car in silence. Jennifer stayed at the hotel. I didn't want to be part of the reconstruction. She knew that there began a pain that only father and daughter could share. But even after all this, there was still a shadow. Because Leo, even though he was down, had still left marks, and one of them, I only found out when it was too late. After that day in Las Vegas, I thought the worst was over, that the truth, when exposed, would bring some kind of immediate healing. My naivety. The silence that followed was crueler than any word spoken at the altar. Mary disappeared. No call, no visit, no sign. I waited 1, 2, 5 days, until I received a dry message on my cell phone. It was hers. 4 words, I need a break. Please don't look for me. I read that sentence more than 20 times. I closed and opened the phone as if that would change the content, but it didn't change. This was not just a request for space. It was a wall, and a wall built on the rubble of something that was once home. The house, by the way, seemed bigger these days, or maybe I had shrunk. He walked through the rooms as if revisiting a place he no longer belongs. I looked at the picture frames on the shelf and wondered when Mary's smile began to fade. There was a photo of her at the age of 7, with crooked teeth, wearing a sunflower dress. I took that picture. I remember the day. I remember the wind shaking her hair. I remember the "I love you, Dad" before going to sleep. I opened the desk drawer and found old notes, folded carefully. Dad, good luck in court. I believe in you. Sorry for breaking the vase. I love you. And a drawing she made when she was 8 years old, the two of us holding an umbrella under a storm with the phrase, "You are my shelter." Now, I was the invader of that memory. I began to doubt everything. Was I too harsh? Could it be that by protecting her, I was the man she most feared she would become? Did she look at me and see someone who prevented her freedom, and not someone who saved her from an abyss? These thoughts do not let up. We wonder where we went wrong, even though we did everything right. And I know that many fathers and mothers on the other side of the screen may have felt this too, that feeling of losing a child while trying to save him, to hold his hand and at the same time see his fingers slipping between his own. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. The days turned into nights, and the nights became days without distinction again. The phone remained silent. Her chair in the kitchen seemed to look at me. That empty space at the table was more noisy than screaming. I went to her room, still the same way as when she moved. Old perfume, books on the shelf, a blanket with the smell of childhood. I sat on the bed and looked at the ceiling, waiting for some answer to fall from above. But nothing came. Leo was out of the way. Justice had been done. But the pain he left, he was still bleeding, because manipulation does not die with prison. It spreads, it takes root in memory, affection, guilt. And I, there, for the first time, asked myself, could it be that in an attempt to save her, did I lose her? It was in this doubt that something unexpected happened. An envelope arrived. No sender, without warning, only with my name written by hand, with a handwriting that I knew since she learned to write. And what was inside? It was not an answer. It was a new silence, but a silence full of clues. The envelope was letter-headed, heavy, and when I opened it, I felt that old smell of legal paper mixed with arrogance. It was from Daniel Reeves's office. Anyone familiar with the legal world in California has heard this name. He is the type of lawyer who does not work with innocent people, but with clients who are too rich to be guilty. He represents people who learn to win on the basis of distortion and not justice. Leo hired him. Of course he did. That was a new strategy. The letter said, among other things, that I was obsessively stalking my son-in-law for unresolved emotional reasons, that my behavior amounted to psychological abuse and attempted sabotage of a legitimate relationship. And the final sentence, written with the coldness of someone who knows the weight of words: if the interferences do not cease, legal measures for violation of privacy and public defamation will be taken. I took a deep breath. That was not just a legal attack, it was an attack on my history, to my role as a father. Days later, notes began to appear on local blogs, dirty, sensationalist headlines. Controlling father pursues daughter's fiancé out of jealousy. Obsessed ex-lawyer tries to prevent heiress's marriage to successful consultant. They even used an old photo of me, in a suit, in a tense trial, with the caption, "Obsessed with control." The truth. It was starting to become relative. I called Marcus. "They're flipping everything." He replied calmly, "It was expected. When the truth doesn't serve, they try to control the narrative." But what really hurt me was not what they said about me. It was to imagine that Mary could read that, and doubt, because doubt once installed eats away at any root. I sat down that afternoon at the desk, with the folder still open, and began to write by hand. A letter. No legal arguments, no evidence attached. Only the naked truth, as we did in ancient times. I wrote down what I felt in the hospital when the phone rang. I wrote what I saw in Jennifer's eyes. I wrote down what I felt when she said, "You tried to warn me." And at the end, a sentence that came to me almost without thinking. "If the love I have given you for 30 years is not stronger than the words of a man who appeared a few months ago, then forgive me. I failed." I kept the letter. I still didn't know if I was going to send it, but you know, there is a moment in every history where the truth is no longer about justice, it's about identity. I needed to remember who I was, who I have always been, and if you've come this far with me, stay a little longer, because what comes now is no longer just about me or about her. It's about how lying, when packaged tightly, almost destroys an entire life. And sometimes, those who play dirty, he plays the last card thinking he has won, but forget that the whole deck is still in the hands of those who have not given up. Their next move, it took me by surprise, but it also gave me a new weapon. One like Leo. Not even Reeves were expecting it. When I realized that papers and documents were no longer enough, that Leo and that starched collar lawyer were trying to turn my story into old man's madness, I understood what was missing. Faces, voices, people of flesh and blood who lived what Mary was about to repeat, because the written truth convinces lawyers, but the truth spoken with emotion, with tears, with living memory. This is what touches the heart of those who still have salvation. I called Jennifer first. She didn't hesitate. He said he was up for talking, recording, showing whatever was needed. Then, with Marcus's help, we got in touch with Amanda Becker, nurse, exhausted, but with a firm look that said everything without having to scream. We booked everything at a hotel in Mission Valley, a small reserved room with neutral lighting and simple chairs. No formality, just room for truth to breathe. I took my old desktop recorder, and Marcus brought a camera borrowed from a journalist friend who agreed to help with the documentation. The idea was only one: to record every word, every pause, every memory. Jennifer began. He took out his cell phone and played an audio. Leo's voice filled the room. "You are unlike anything I have ever experienced. I never imagined I would love like this again." I had heard this phrase before, from Mary's mouth. It was the same, word for word. Amanda showed messages. "Don't tell your dad yet. He will never understand our love. Your past is holding you back. You need to break free." She showed us a partnership agreement that Leo made her sign, and then sold her share outside, without warning. With each piece placed on the table, I felt not only that the case gained strength, but that the truth was creating human form. It was no longer just a coup. It was a disease, a cycle, a pattern that could only be broken with collective courage. At one point, as Jennifer told about the first night Leo disappeared, no warning, no message, just the absence, she stopped. The voice failed. He looked to the side and said, "He always left when he knew I was going to ask about my money, as if my discomfort was a nuisance to his freedom." It was there that my chest tightened, because I realized that Mary, sooner or later, would ask this same question, and maybe when he did, he would no longer be there. You know, some memories are tattooed in places we don't even know we have. Sometimes it's not the whole scene. It's a sound, a word, a sensation. Like the breeze of a specific day. A cross, look at the cafe. A glass left in the sink, that stays. It never comes out again. If you, on the other side, have ever had a memory like this, an instant that marked you, or know someone who has experienced something similar to what I'm telling, comment below. He just says, "I've seen that," or "I remembered someone," or whatever your heart tells you, because when we share, the pain weighs less. I left that meeting with the recordings in my hand, and my heart fuller than in the last few months. For the first time, I felt that maybe I could not only free my daughter from a predator, but also rescue that girl from the sunflower dress who once called me a shelter. But like any silent war, the last battle was yet to happen, and the battlefield, it was going to be her heart. I thought I had already gone through the worst part. That after all that, the chapel, the evidence, the testimonies of the other women, the penny had dropped for good. That Mary, at last, had opened her eyes. But life sometimes likes to test how far we can take it before bending our knees. Marcus called me on a rainy afternoon. I was sitting by the window, listening to that sound of drips on the roof, which always gave me a sense of peace. But after that call, I never heard the rain in the same way again. "Floyd, I need to tell you something." I was silent. "Leo, he was seen with Mary, twice. The first in a cafe in Pacific Beach. The second in a parking lot near the beach, where she used to walk as a child. Strange schedules. Times when she said she was in therapy. The detective had photos, schedules, even a video of them talking. He approached as if consoling, with that body language of a savior. She looked dejected, but it wasn't going away. It was. I felt my stomach turn, not out of anger at him, but for the pain of seeing that she was still imprisoned, that even after everything, he still had room inside her, because love, when manipulated, leaves a scar that looks like affection. And I understood then that fighting Leo with evidence and arguments was hitting a cold iron. It was not with reason that he arrested her, it was with emotion, with the idea that only he understood her, that his father was an obstacle, an enemy of freedom. And if she still heard him, if she still found him, it is because something inside her still believed it. It was one of the hardest moments of my life, because you prepare to face the enemy from the outside. But when the enemy plants roots inside the head of the one you love, the battlefield becomes a labyrinth. I walked around the house as someone looking for something that has never lost, but misses. I passed by the portraits, the old letters, the door of her room still ajar. I sat on the couch with a weight on my chest that not even the heart attack had caused. And it was in this silence that an idea began to be born. Maybe for her to break free, I needed to get out of the way. Perhaps my presence was reinforcing the resistance. My every attempt to help was seen as control, each alert as judgment. And then I asked myself, could it be that this time, the best I can do, is it to disappear? It hurt to think that. But it hurt even more to accept that maybe it was true. I thought of Sarah, in how she would say to trust. She's got you inside her, Floyd, more than you think. I heard this phrase as if it were whispered from the other side of time. So I decided to do something different, not a fight, not a denunciation, not a confrontation, but a silent gesture, definitive, something that did not require forgiveness nor response, that would leave only the truth exposed in her time. I prepared an envelope. In it, I put a copy of the recording of Jennifer's testimony, another from Amanda, a handwritten letter, without charge, without hurt, just saying, "Daughter, love doesn't require you to believe me now, but if one day something inside you starts to hurt, and you don't know why, you open that envelope again, and he remembers those who have always been by his side, even in silence." I didn't leave it at her house. I didn't send it by mail. I asked a trusted friend of ours to deliver it, someone who took care of her as a child, someone she wouldn't associate with my insistence. And then I hung up the phone. I closed the folder. I stopped looking at social networks. I deleted the detective's number. I withdrew from the war, but not by giving up. It was a strategic move, sometimes the most powerful act of love. It is the retreat. And it is curious how silence, when it comes from the right place, can speak louder than 1,000 truths shouted. What I didn't know yet is that my absence would be precisely what would open the rift in her heart, and that when she opened that envelope, she would no longer be alone. I didn't say anything to anyone, nor to Marcus, not even to the few neighbors who still waved from the balcony. I closed the windows from the inside, left the key on the sink, and turned my back on the house where I built everything, with Sarah, with Mary, with myself. I turned the house over to a trusted broker, cleared all the bank accounts in my name, and transferred every penny, every square inch of property to a new, irrevocable trust. Hermetic structure, impenetrable clauses, no loopholes. And most importantly, shielded against any legal challenge, whether from Mary, Leo, or any other name that appeared in the future. I needed to disappear, not out of cowardice, but out of strategy, and even more, for dignity. I chose Ashland, Oregon, a small town surrounded by mountains and tall trees that seemed to hold ancient secrets. I rented a wooden chalet, discreet, away from the center. A simple house with a balcony facing the sunset. It took me little. A few books, the laptop, my notes, basic clothes, and a photo. That old photo of Sarah smiling with Mary as a baby in her arms. That was all I needed. I settled there as if I didn't expect anything. I started my days with strong coffee, long walks along the forest trails, and silence. A silence that was no longer loneliness. It was a choice, a mute protest, a thoughtful absence. You know, sometimes we make too much noise trying to prove something. And I realized that in my case, the more I talked, the less she listened. Leo left marks that distorted any sentence of mine, no matter how loving it was. So, my last act, It would be to disappear, to give it the greatest possible contrast, the presence that has always been there and that now, it is no more. I hung up the old number, I changed the registrations, deleted accounts on social networks. I became invisible, at least to those who insisted on seeing me with Leo's eyes. In the beginning, I confess, there was a dull pain, waking up not knowing if she was okay, sleeping without knowing if she remembered me. But over time, I realized that this was also part of the process. It was like that pruning that hurts the tree, but prepares it to bloom again. And it was there, between a cup of coffee and a pine-scented trail, that I began to write again. Nothing grandiose, just memories, reflections, things I had never said to her, things that maybe one day she will read. I don't know if she cried when she realized I had disappeared. I don't know if you looked for the old number and it went straight to the automatic message. I don't know if he went to the house and found it empty. But one thing I do know, absence is noise for those who have always had company. And if there is a justice that does not need a jury, this is it. The pain I felt for not being able to protect her turned into strength to let her walk her own path. Because sometimes, saving someone means letting them walk as far as it hurts. What I didn't know, as I watched the mist rise through the mountains of Ashland on that cold morning, it was that the absence that I planted with so much care, it was finally beginning to blossom within her. It was on a Thursday that my phone rang for the first time in weeks, but this time I didn't answer. I saw the name on the screen, Mary, that which I have waited for so long, there, before my eyes. And even then, I let it ring until it fell into the voicemail, not out of revenge, but because at that moment, I needed her to feel exactly what she had been denying until then, that my absence was real, that I wasn't playing, I was gone, and only love would be able to bring me back. In the days that followed, 2 more calls, then a message, short, almost shy. "Dad, are you gone?" I read, reread, but I didn't answer. It was as if her every word was rehearsing a comeback, but still resisting the deep dive. She needed to go to the bottom of her own silence. He needed to hear the echoes of everything he had ignored for so long. Leo, of course, tried to take the reins of the situation. Marcus told me, through a common contact, that he was saying that I was playing emotional games, that disappearing was typical of a manipulator, but his game was starting to crumble. Because, this time, I wasn't there to react anymore. And without a target to attack, his speech lost strength. Mary began to poke around in the past. Discreetly, he went back to reading old messages. Those repeated promises, the same compliments millimetrically constructed. And each sentence seemed to echo Jennifer's voice, Amanda's. The standards now screamed. Where she had previously seen love, she was now beginning to see a script. She scoured the emails, noticed the same PDFs, the same invitations, the same justifications for disappearances. He began to put pieces together, alone. And that's where the power of silence lies. Sometimes what we don't say is worth 1,000 speeches. To remain silent is not to give up. Sometimes it's the only way to get someone to listen. She sent another message days later. "I know you tried to protect me. I wasn't ready to see it." This time, I confess, my hands trembled. But still, I held on. It was not yet the time to respond. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because there, at that very moment when the silence began to scream inside her, something new was born. A space. A crack of lucidity. And as much as Leo tried to glue the pieces together with promises and guilt, she was no longer the same. His control was beginning to slip from the edges, and I was there, quiet, but closer to it than ever. What would she do after that discovery? Well, that's when something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything. Again. Mary returned to the house. It was no longer hers, nor mine, nor anyone else's. It was just a wooden structure, full of silences and marks of time. The broker, who was still taking care of the sale, allowed her to come in to pick up some objects that had been left behind. He said she was different, calmer, more serious, with a distant look, like someone who carries a longing mixed with regret. She walked through each room. I have touched these walls for more than 30 years, and I know they still carry voices. And maybe there, in that silence of the wood, she heard more from me than she did when I spoke. When he entered the room, he knelt by the old safe built in behind the bookshelf. I left the combination on the back of a photo on purpose, as if something inside me knew it would come back one day. And he did. Inside the safe, there was no money, nor jewelry, nor documents of value. Only one thing, a letter, handwritten with my handwriting already a little shaky, but still firm. I had written it on a cold afternoon in Ashland, with a heavy heart and wet eyes. It was a letter that would only make sense when the absence began to hurt more than the anger. She sat on the living room floor, leaning against the same wall where, as a child, she made colored chalk drawings. He read in silence. "If you're reading this, it's because you felt my absence, and that's more than I expected. Because absence, daughter, it only hurts when there is real love behind it. Mary, I loved you more than I love my own life. Everything I did was out of care, not control. The man you almost married would have done to you the same thing he did to Amanda and Jennifer. You weren't weak, you weren't stupid, you have been deceived. And being deceived, it's something that can happen even to the strongest. But you are more than the mistake you made. You are my daughter, and I forgive you. And more important than that, I hope you forgive yourself too. One day, if you want to find me, I will be where silence lives. With love, Dad," she cried, not of despair, but of recognition. The kind of crying that comes when the truth finally finds room to breathe. It is strange to think that sometimes a letter kept in the dark can illuminate more than 1,000 conversations in the light of day. And if you're listening to me now, let me tell you something. There are moments in life when we realize that the most difficult forgiveness is not what we ask for. It is what we need to give ourselves. Curious, right? How long can the heart take to understand what the eyes have seen for so long? But what did she do after reading that letter? That's what really changed everything. When pain turns into lucidity, no one holds back. And that's exactly what happened to my daughter. After the letter, after the silence, after the memories that came back with force inside that empty house, it has changed. Not to please anyone, it changed inside. It changed because finally it saw with its own eyes what my love, as insistent as it was, could not show. And like every cornered predator, Leo attempted his last blow. This time, he used justice as a weapon. He filed a lawsuit alleging that Mary had deceived him about ownership of the apartment. He said he had been harmed. He said he had invested emotionally and financially in the property. He wanted compensation. He wanted to play the victim. The action was leaked to the press. Sensationalist blogs loved the narrative. Consultant betrayed by fiancé who lied about assets. But this time, Mary didn't tremble. With the documents I left organized, with the trust's impeccable legal structure, and with the public support of Amanda and Jennifer, who now wanted justice as well, she hired a strong lawyer. And it went up. The judge read the contract, he read the clauses, he read the testimonies. And he denied Leo's request with a firm, almost symbolic sentence. This court will not recognize as a victim the one who lives by the manipulation of others. The prosecution then reopened the criminal case, and the avalanche began. 2 new women appeared, one from Arizona, the other from Colorado. Similar reports, similar losses, identical lies. Within weeks, Leo's name went from being synonymous with successful consultant to making headlines with the word he feared most: serial fraudster. The companies he claimed to represent released official statements, denying any link. Some contracts he displayed in PDF were forged, and the image he built with so much care collapsed. And me? I watched everything from afar. From the balcony of the chalet, with the cup of coffee in hand and the heart beating in a different rhythm. Not relief, nor of revenge, but of peace. Because what I couldn't do with 1,000 arguments, she managed to do with just one act, that of finally believing in herself. But make no mistake, there was still one last arrangement to go, a moment that neither she nor I nor Leo expected. Because when justice sets in, silence finally speaks. And what would Mary say to me after all? I could never have imagined. It was late afternoon in Ashland, when the sun began to rest behind the mountains, and the trees, already tired of autumn, were slowly stripping off their golden leaves. I was there, sitting in my wooden chair, the same one where I usually read or just listen to the silence that lives among the pine trees. The coffee was already cold in the mug, and the sky was beginning to tinge copper. That's when I heard the sound of tires crushing the gravel on the road. It was not common for someone to arrive there, not without warning. I closed the book slowly, my heart jumped. An old man recognizes when fate approaches. The white truck stopped a few meters ahead. The door opened, and she went down. Mary, thinner, shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying more than they should, the face without makeup, without haste, without defense. In the eyes, something I hadn't seen in years, clarity, and maybe nostalgia. She carried a backpack on her back and a letter in her hand. He climbed the dirt road with slow steps, as if each step was a request for forgiveness. I stood up but said nothing. I couldn't even do it. It was as if the throat knew that, at that moment, the silence said more. She stopped 2 steps away from me. She looked as if she still did not believe that she was received. And then quietly, with a broken voice, she said, "Dad." I stayed there, firm. His eyes watered, but his feet rooted in the ground like the trees around. She held out the letter, but before I could even pick it up, she whispered, "You were right, and I'm sorry." The words came like rain on cracked earth, without warning, but so necessary. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't say, "I knew it." He said nothing that could hurt even more what was already raw. I just opened my arms. She threw herself at them as she did when she was little, in the days when school was cruel, or when she dreamed of monsters under her bed. And I held on. I held on tightly, with all the strength I still had left in my already tired body. And in that embrace, more than words, she understood everything. We stayed there for minutes that seemed like a good eternity, the kind of eternity we would like to freeze. She cried. I cried too. But it was a different cry. It was as if that hug was cleaning every layer of hurt, guilt, accumulated silence. After a while, we sat down. She began to tell everything. How was the process? How he faced the trial? How the truths appeared and the eyes opened? He told me that for weeks he tried to find me, until he decided to go to the old house, hoping to find something. And he found the letter. "I reread that letter 7 times, Dad," she said, her voice still trembling. "It was like you were there, telling me exactly what I needed to hear. No judgment, no anger, only love. We stayed until night came. She said she didn't know how long she could stay. I said I wouldn't ask. I just thanked him for coming. And it was there, on that simple balcony, with the smell of the trees and the sound of the wind passing between the branches, that I understood. The pain passed, but love remained. And sometimes, my friend, what remains after the pain is what really matters. But what did she do before she left? It was what kept me silent for days, because in that last conversation, she revealed to me something I never expected to hear. Mary stayed there with me for 3 days. She slept in the guest room, prepared breakfast in the morning, helped me sweep the balcony, and even tried to cook a recipe that her mother made. She missed the point of the seasoning, but she got the gesture right. We talked little, but it was enough. When he left an envelope on the table. Inside, a photo of her small on her mother's lap, and behind she wrote, "I am your daughter. I always have been. Thank you for not giving up, even when I gave up on myself. Today, she's still in therapy. She is not cured of everything but walks. And I don't ask, I don't charge, I don't invade. I only listen when she decides to tell it. And it comes, with less guilt, with more presence. And that's enough. As for Leo, he disappeared from the news. They say that he was sued by new victims and that he left the state. But for me, it doesn't matter anymore, because this story was never about him. It was about what true love does when it has no more guns, he hopes. He is silent. He trusts that time, sooner or later, brings back those who have been lost. I didn't scream. I walked away, not with anger, but with a love that has learned not to insist. To let the other go, even if the heart begs to go after it. And it was this silence that spoke for me, that showed everything that words could no longer say. You know, after Sarah was gone, all I wanted most was to keep our little girl safe. I thought that meant protecting, but I learned that sometimes protecting, it is allowing the other to fall and discover that he can get up, who can think on their own, who can make mistakes and still be loved. Today, I don't have a big house, nor an office full of achievements. I have a cottage in the middle of the mountains, some books, and a balcony where the sun visits me every morning. And most of all, I have peace. The peace of those who loved in silence, endured the absence, and chose to wait with dignity. And if you have listened to me this far, I thank you. Really. Not out of vanity, but because sharing this story with someone makes it lighter, more useful, more alive. If it touched you in any way, if it brought you any memories, some hope, or even a tear, leave a like on this video. For me, it's like a hug back. And if you want to follow me, listen to other stories, feel that you are not alone in this world, subscribe here to the channel. It's like saying, I'll go back to the coffee tomorrow, you know? And tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I like to imagine where these words land, on which balconies, in which hearts. Oh, and it activates the bell too. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again, because there's more. There are other memories, other pains that became strength, other silences that spoke more than entire speeches. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.